You're listening to episode 36 of A Whole New You podcast. Cecily Dickey joins us on today's show. We're discussing her life on a farm in Canada where she grows much of her own food and homeschools her children. But Cecily's real story is that she has also quite miraculously reversed her autoimmune condition, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, through proper nutrition, stress management, and helpful supplementation. You're sure to learn a lot from Cecily in this episode. Before we get to the show, I would like to read a 5-star review that we received through iTunes. This is from Bren Social. She writes, "Wow, this podcast is packed with information from two smart ladies. If a healthy and balanced lifestyle is what you're looking for, then this is the podcast for you." Thank you so much for taking the time to write this review. Ratings and reviews help to boost our rankings, which allows us to be found by others who might not already know about our show. If you would be so kind as to leave us a review, we'll be sure to read it on a future episode. So without further ado, let's get to our interview with Cecily. Welcome to A Whole New You podcast. I'm your co-host, Kim Maravich. I'm a registered nurse and author of the book 360 Health. I'm joined by my dear friend, Lori Biddle, a health and wellness coach certified through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Our show exists to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health, with weekly tips and conversation about self-care, mindset, nutrition, fitness, and clean living. Please keep in mind that the material provided in this podcast is intended as general information only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the show. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I am pleased to have Cecily Dickey joining me on the podcast. Cecily lives on a farm in Canada, and she's passionate about eating whole foods for life and for healing. She has 10 years' experience as a nurse. However, her focus has shifted to helping other women understand their own health and purpose and grow in knowledge and faith. She encourages them to live each day with intention. Cecily and her husband Kyle have 3 children, and they enjoy homeschooling them, pursuing new adventures, and living life to the fullest. Cecily, your life sounds so exciting. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Kim. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. I feel like we know each other. We've connected on Instagram. And Cecily has a pretty popular Facebook group, and I've watched her go live on her Facebook group. So I kind of feel like either like I've seen you on TV or just like I just know you.
Yeah, no,
in that
it's
way.
very
So,
true.
yeah.
Well, we've been like Instagram friends now for quite a while. So it's amazing how much you can get to know somebody through that channel.
Yeah, it really is. Right. And I mentioned that on other episodes before. It's just that it's been such a blessing to, there are so many ways of connecting. It's not just like typing things. You can leave voice messages. So Cecily and I were leaving voice messages for each other earlier today. So it has been a real treat. And what else is really cool is that, right now we're still in Pittsburgh for another week. And, I am on the East Coast of the United States, and Cecily is on towards the West Coast of Canada.
Yeah.
And so we would never have met in real life. But
That is pretty awesome.
yeah, right. So, before we get into the interview, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your family?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that bio that you gave touched on a lot of it, but I have been married for 12 pretty awesome years to my husband, Kyle. He's a high school teacher, public high school teacher, so people often will find it a little bit odd that we chose to homeschool. But we homeschool, and it's been such a blessing to us. And yeah, we have 3 kids, 2 boys, ages 7 and 6, and a girl who's 4. And we live on a farm. Some people would call it more of a homestead because, we grow our own food, our produce, and our meat. So that's like a new adventure every day. And like you, I've been a nurse for 10 years now. Primarily, I worked in home health, but started my own private nursing business about a year ago. And that really sparked a love for being an entrepreneur. And so now that has actually led into other things as well. So it's a full life, a busy life, but we're loving it.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig in a little bit deeper to some of those things. And I did not realize you had just started your own
Mm.
business. You really are a busy lady because you're an
I
entrepreneur.
am.
Yeah, you're an entrepreneur in many ways.
Yeah, it's kind of at the core.
Right, of who you are, but you seem to handle it with
Mm-hmm.
such grace too. That's a play on the grace to grow is your Instagram and your Facebook, but you seem to handle everything so smoothly. And maybe we don't see everything behind the scenes, but it seems like you
Nope.
have your act together. that's that's true with all of us, right?
uh, oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do try to show a lot of behind the scenes and I try to be honest, but I mean, some days are easier than others, and that's just
Yeah.
the reality.
Right. Well, I have to laugh because yesterday, I think it was yesterday on your Instagram stories, you showed this like entire roll of
Mhm.
toilet paper that you had just retrieved from the toilet that it was like soaking wet.
Yeah,
And I just
that was
thought,
special.
yeah, right, right. And I just thought, yeah, we've gone through that here too. Sometimes I walk into the bathroom and I think, what in the world? You can't turn your eye
Yep.
for 5 minutes sometimes.
Oh, no.
So you are actually the first Canadian that we've had on the show. So that's pretty cool. And as you mentioned, you also live on a farm. So I would love to know just a little bit more about your daily life on the farm and, what a day in the life looks like, what kind of animals and plants and gardens you have.
Okay. Well, yeah, definitely live on a farm here in Canada, the west coast of Canada in BC. Such
Okay.
a beautiful spot. Of course, I'm a little biased, but
Yeah.
it's a great place to have a farm. And we used to live in town, but both of us, my husband and I, are just really passionate about growing our own food because we know the effects some of the more industrial farming is having on the environment and on the health of people.
Hmm.
So what we've created here is basically, yeah, huge gardens. We have all sorts of animals. Right now I'm actually looking at our pigs through my bedroom window. We
Oh,
have ducks that lay eggs. We have ducks for meat. We have, there I see our meat chickens. They're growing right now out on the pasture. Water buffalo, which is a little
oh
bit
my.
random, but it's fun and they're beautiful animals. Of course, we have cats because when you're on a farm, you need someone to take care of mice and rats.
Yes.
um, Dogs, cows. We've got a little bit of everything. It's a bit of a funny farm. And then as far as the as far as the gardens, we grow pretty much everything we can. So this year, for example, we have broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower, kale, spinach, lettuce, carrots, peas, beans, tomatoes, carrots, leeks, celery, all sorts of squash, zucchini, pumpkins, potatoes, peppers, cucumbers, herbs, sunflowers, and we grow lots of flowers that keep the bees really happy.
Mm.
Um, but as for our days, I mean, they're all so different because we have so many different things going on. Like we're definitely not the sort of people that are like, oh, this is Kyle and Cecily and he's a teacher and she's a nurse. It's like,
Hmm.
this is Kyle and Cecily and they have a lot of different things going on. So Kyle, before he goes to work in the morning, he's the one that gets up and feeds the animals and takes care of all of that. But it's great where we live. I mean, often the kids are out like at 6:30 in the morning running around in their pajamas helping daddy with the chores.
Hmm.
And so that's really cool. And we feel so blessed that they get to do those sorts of things. While they're doing that, I'm inside just making breakfast. And we always make like a really hearty breakfast, again, with food that we've usually grown on the farm. So eggs and sauerkraut, which people think is a little bit odd for breakfast, but I think it's great.
Good for gut health, right?
That's right. Yeah. And then we just go about our day. Like the kids do chores. If it's the school year, we'll work on some school, which takes us, an hour and a half or 2 hours. And through it all, we're just kind of running our businesses and doing our thing. So it's hard to kind of nail down what a
Hmm.
specific day looks like because it's always different. It's dynamic.
Sure. Yeah, lots of tasks, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think, if our
Lots of tasks.
listeners, sure, I can't even imagine. But I would
Mm-hmm.
encourage our listeners definitely check out Cecily's Instagram. And she's going to share all of that at the end too. But
Hmm.
her Instagram feed, I just love looking not just at your feed, it's mostly your stories because like today you were walking barefoot through your garden and it just like
Hmm.
the majesty of the earth where you live is just so gorgeous.
Yes.
It's
Oh, yeah.
breathtaking. Yeah, I
Oh,
would
thank
love
you.
to come and visit sometime.
You
But
should.
yeah,
Yeah,
I would just love
we'd
that.
love
But
it.
I
We actually have a B&B on the property as well.
oh,
So it would be, you have a place to
ooh.
stay.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And do you run it? The B&B?
No, I
Okay.
don't. I
Okay.
no, it's actually my parents' B&B. We are their neighbors.
Oh, that's right.
So they run it, but I help a lot with
Okay.
the social media
Yeah.
aspect of that. And
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, of course you do because,
Hmm.
because you're Mrs. Entrepreneur, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I can't help myself. I
Yeah.
like to watch things
Yeah.
grow no matter
Yeah.
what it is. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
Well, very cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just think it's gorgeous and it makes me I just it brings me to a time when I think about even my grandparents didn't live on a
Hmm.
farm, but just returning to the
Hmm.
earth and growing your own crops and
Absolutely.
just
Hmm.
that love for nature and then translating that into your own food in your own home. And that brings me to my next question that I was going to ask is just that on Instagram, we also see
Hmm.
you making your own food from scratch, and you've done stories about that.
Hmm.
Um, whether it's from some of the produce you've picked or, meat or dairy or eggs from the animals on your farm. So,
Hmm.
could you share with us some of your favorite meals or the foods that you prepare for your
Oh
family?
yeah. Yeah, so it might be disappointing because I do keep things fairly simple, or at least I believe they're fairly simple. Um, so what my husband and I often say to each other, like when we're having deeper conversations about life and the state of the world, and we'll often say like convenience is killing people, and it's killing
Mm,
people in so many different ways. And of course, one of those ways is food.
mhm,
So I guess that's a big part of why we are doing what we do on the farm and growing our own food. I mean, trust me when I say it's not convenient for us. And there's days I wish
mhm.
we weren't doing it. Like the
Yeah.
other day, the water buffalo had gotten out and were running down the road.
Oh,
And,
no.
um, and it's not so easy raising and butchering your own chickens or growing your own produce and preserving it. But we really believe that convenience is a big problem in our culture. And so
Mhm,
that's why we do things the way we do. So as for our meals though, I mean, I do try to keep things simple while focusing on whole foods.
mhm,
But I keep it simple just due to time constraints. So
mhm,
generally, when I'm thinking of planning a meal, it's always centered around some sort of protein. And I'm so blessed to be able to say that the protein comes from our own farm, whether it's
mhm,
meat or eggs or something like that. Healthy fats. So, I mean, butter, coconut oil, duck fat is something we love. Then, of course, veggies. And like, I'm the type of mom that puts veggies in breakfast because
mhm,
I just believe it's so important. So often I'll roast up a chicken, or I'll usually do two at a time so that I can like repurpose the meat throughout the week. I usually do a batch of bone broth every week because it's so important for gut health and skin health and everything. Sauerkraut. That's another thing I do regularly, at least on a 3-week rotating schedule. But I like to make up a big pot of soup. So, like I said, it's so simple. I fear it's boring,
mm-mm,
but thankfully, my kids aren't picky because this is just the food they've grown up eating and they've gotten used to this, which is a blessing. Smoothies is a big thing. Salads. The kids love sandwiches. I don't typically eat them, but even our sandwiches, I try to power pack them as much as possible. So just really
mhm,
simple stuff that it just might seem countercultural that we kind of produce everything ourselves and make things from scratch. But I encourage people to give it a try, not necessarily growing everything because not everyone has the luxury of being able to do that. But when you start thinking of food in terms of like our friend Rita always
mhm.
says, how God made it, it's not as complicated as it seems.
Right, exactly. And I think that it's important to note that like you mentioned, the simplicity of the meals. I don't think that's boring at all. And in fact, I think it gives people hope because we do live in an age of convenience and we're on the go all the time. And it's not entirely our fault. That's the way our culture has, become. And those foods
Yeah,
are so readily available. I'll say this, and I've said it before. I blame food manufacturers for the quality of ingredients that
absolutely.
are going into these
Mm-hmm.
products. You can find some healthier convenience foods, but as far as centering your meal, I mean, you listed some very easy to follow rules that are super nourishing, like
Mm-hmm.
concentrating on clean
Mm-hmm.
protein. I mean, how great that you
Mm-hmm.
have, grass fed and pastured animal products
Mm-hmm.
right there that you're
Oh
able
yeah,
to pick from. But we all have grocery stores, so we can go and pick the cleanest cuts of meat that we
absolutely.
have, right? The healthy fats you mentioned, the veggies. I mean, just making a meal of those things is super nourishing, and it's not that hard. I mean, and I think that's the message here is that um, you don't have to be a chef, because I certainly am not. And if I had to know which spices went with which dishes and how long to cook things, I mean, I'd be in trouble. So
Yes.
yeah.
And I mean, there is a time for those fancier meals. Like I
Hmm.
do like to like make something really special every now and then. And
Hmm.
I use spices every day, but I don't measure them. I just throw them in and hope for the
Yeah.
best. And I just think, there's a time for that. But when you're a busy mom and,
Hmm.
every day can often feel like a marathon,
Yeah.
then you just got to do what works and you got to do what's healthy. And also just be okay with the fact that, like it's okay for your kids not to eat pizza once a week. And it's okay for them not to have chicken fingers and fries. They will survive. In fact, they'll thrive.
Now we'd like to take a minute to give a shout out to our show partner, Perfect Supplements. Perfect Supplements is a family owned and operated business that supports local farms. Their superfoods and supplements contain no synthetic nutrients, no artificial colors or flavors, and no GMOs. Products range from collagen and bone broth powders to plant proteins, greens, and adaptogenic mushroom and herb capsules. Lately, I'm a huge fan of their desiccated liver, which really boosts my energy and ensures that I'm getting the A and B vitamins plus iron that I really need. It's made from grass-fed cows entirely free of hormones, pesticides, and antibiotics. To check out their wide array of supplements, go to perfectsupplements.com/Kim. If you use coupon code KIM10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. This is a great way to get superfood nutrition while helping to support our podcast. And as a disclaimer, it is not the intention of our podcast to provide specific medical advice, but rather to provide you with information to better understand the role of dietary supplements in health. We urge you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider to discuss both the advantages and risks of using dietary supplements. Now let's get back to our interview with Cecily. So that, it leads me to thinking about your health and just what a
Mm-hmm.
change from convenience foods to a more whole foods diet,
Mm-hmm.
what benefits that has for our health. And you have a very
Oh,
interesting
yes. Yeah.
story. Yeah. And one of the reasons I wanted to interview you is because you do have Hashimoto's, but you have essentially
Mm-hmm.
reversed the condition through your diet and also some lifestyle choices. So, could you tell us first, just for our listeners, in case they're not familiar, what Hashimoto's is, and then speak to some of the
Mm-hmm.
changes that you made that probably have factored into your healing?
Oh, I'd love to. This is like a passion topic of mine.
Great.
um, and it's spiraled into so many things for me in my life. But yeah, so Hashimoto's is an autoimmune thyroid disease. And so what happens with it is that your body, for whatever reason, and there's a number of things that can trigger this, your body starts to identify your thyroid tissue as foreign and begins to attack it. So then what happens is your thyroid gland becomes damaged and then underactive, resulting in lower than normal amounts of thyroid hormone, which you absolutely need. So typically, the standard treatment for this is a medication called Synthroid. And you can expect that this medication will synthetically replace the thyroid hormone that's necessary for your body. But at the same time, your medication dosage will increase over time because your thyroid gland is still under attack. So while they're replacing the thyroid hormone synthetically, it's not getting to the root cause of what started the autoimmune disease to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the typical treatment. And the other thing is, if you don't have any treatment at all for Hashimoto's, like if you never get diagnosed officially with having hypothyroidism, it can lead to cardiac complications, psychiatric complications, even death when it gets to a severe point. Like it's not an optional thing to have thyroid hormone in your body. So when that's
Mm-hmm.
low, you need to address it with a doctor. So with that being said, I mean, when I was first diagnosed with well, actually, first they just called it hypothyroidism. They didn't take the diagnosis any deeper than that at the time. I just started
Hmm.
Synthroid because I was diagnosed right after I had my first child, who, this is a whole other story that I won't get into, but he was sick for about the first 4.5, almost 5 years of his life. And it was just very stressful. And after he was
Yeah.
born, I had one miscarriage, and I was also diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And
Mm-hmm.
then I ended up having another baby. And then I had 3 more miscarriages after that, and
Oh
then
my
another
goodness.
baby. And it was just a very, very busy and challenging time of life with a lot of like different ups and downs. So I didn't really have the time or the ability to think too much about my own health, which is a really, really sad but true fact.
Mm-hmm.
But then after things settled down a little bit, I was like, but why? But why am I sick? Why am I not feeling better? And why has no one figured out like why I got this to begin with? Like at the time I was diagnosed, I think I was 23 or 24. Like I shouldn't have been sick, in my opinion. And I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I'm the personality that's like a dog with a bone. And once I decided I was going to get to the bottom of this, I just wasn't stopping. And so with the guidance of my naturopath and honestly, mostly my own research, I made a lot of lifestyle changes that significantly improved my condition. So it's funny though, because I had always been fairly health conscious, but it's interesting how a person can think that they know about health until they really need to know about health. And then, you know what I mean? You realize how much you were
Mm-hmm.
missing.
Yeah.
So for me and for anybody with Hashimoto's, one major change that I made and anyone with Hashimoto's should make is to go gluten-free. And there are
Mm-hmm.
many, many studies to corroborate this. So I'll just kind
Mm-hmm.
of briefly talk about why that is. So essentially, there's this thing in gluten called gliadin, and it strongly resembles thyroid tissue. And so what happens is you eat gluten and your body goes after the gliadin, but at the same time, it starts attacking the thyroid tissue as well because they look so similar. So basically, it's a case of mistaken identity, and there's only one loser, and that's the person.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and the immune response to gluten can last 6 months. So it's absolutely essential that there's no gluten at all in your diet if you have Hashimoto's,
Mm-hmm.
just because of the scientific fact that it's just mistaken identity. So the other thing is cutting out some really inflammatory foods like dairy and soy. I do still eat some grass-fed organic butter and ghee and occasionally milk kefir that I make on my own, but that's all in moderation. I mean, very little grains unless they're properly prepared, because you learn about, phytic acid and how difficult that is for people to digest. And so a lot of bone broth to work on my gut health. I've worked on my liver health. I've also learned the importance of very high quality supplementation. I actually just read an article the other day about how a lot of supplements on Amazon can actually be fakes, including like well-known probiotic brands that,
Mm-hmm.
anyone can sell on Amazon, and there can be anything in those supplements. So, just making sure that you are supplementing well, because even with a 100% healthy diet, it's just hard to get everything you need. So another huge key is reducing stress, which is so difficult for most
Yeah.
women and most people. Balancing gut health and blood sugar. So all of those things I addressed at one point or another. Honestly, the most difficult thing was the stress levels, because I'm living my life halfway in the past on like a homestead, and with my other foot, I'm firmly in the modern world. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like trying to live two lives at once. So it's busy, and stress is hard for all moms. But I mean, how I was when I first discovered it was Hashimoto's is my antibody levels, which in Canada, the levels you should be under are 35. 35 and under for antibody levels means you don't have autoimmune thyroiditis. Mine were over 1,000. So
Mm.
I was basically 1,000 points over where I should have been in my autoimmune numbers. And over the course of a couple years, I've gotten mine now down from over 1,000 to down to around 200. So they've dropped about 800 points with the different lifestyle changes that I've made. So I still have a little ways to go. So it's not completely reversed, but that is absolutely my goal. And what I've been seeing is I've been seeing my medication dosage go down when all around me, I see other people with the same disease having their dosages going up. So I'm just really passionate about helping people understand that a diagnosis is never like the end, and you don't have to just be
Mhm.
okay with that. Like, you are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to make changes. These are all your choices. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of my story with that. Did that make sense, or is there anything else
No, that makes perfect sense. And I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned. Um, First of all, one thing that I have heard many times from many people is that after the birth of a child,
Mm-hmm.
that women's bodies go through so many hormonal
Oh yeah.
fluctuations that it's not uncommon to develop an
Mm-hmm.
autoimmune condition
Yep.
right after a
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy. And so I think that, some of these things are so interconnected. And of course, stress, there is no bigger stress on a body than
No,
to carry
exactly.
and deliver a child,
Yep.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big thing. And I also am so thankful that you mentioned a gluten-free diet, and I want to scream it from the
Mm-hmm.
rafters. And it's such,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the circle that you're speaking with, but so many people think it is such a fad, the whole gluten-free thing. And while there are convenience foods that are gluten-free, and manufacturers again are diving into the gluten-free craze, I don't think that people quite understand what it is and why it can be harmful. And you mentioned the gliadin that's in it that can mimic thyroid tissue. But I
Mm-hmm.
also want to say that from my own research and experience, know that going gluten free can help pretty much anyone with any autoimmune condition
Yep. And
because of the
inflammation. Yeah.
inflammation. Hmm. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because of the
Yep.
inflammation. So I think it's important so that our listeners here, well, and also, and Cecily, I don't have numbers, and I don't want to put you on the spot, and I don't know if you know this either, but the majority of low thyroid conditions really are
Yeah.
Hashimoto's. Yeah.
They are.
So-
Yeah. And I'm
mhm.
struggling to remember the exact percentage, but it is
Yeah.
majority.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So, and I think that that's something that a lot of people are not aware of, because there are so
Mm-hmm.
many people in our country that have low thyroid, especially women who are on
Mm-hmm.
Synthroid, and probably most likely you do have Hashimoto's. That is
Mm-hmm.
just part of, and I do blame, our modern diet and those convenience foods, and that the
Yeah.
gluten of today is very different than the
Mm-hmm.
gluten of biblical
Oh,
times.
absolutely.
It's
Mm-hmm.
been very hybridized and changed. A lot
Yeah.
of it's genetically modified,
Mm-hmm.
but it can be so inflammatory. So what I want to, highlight here is just that if you do have a thyroid condition, you probably have Hashimoto's as well. Following
Yeah.
these things that Cecily was talking about are so important. But if you have any autoimmune condition, whether it's like
Mm-hmm.
psoriasis or
Yeah.
Graves' disease or the
Yeah.
many, many autoimmune conditions, that all of these
Mm-hmm.
steps, eliminating these things from your diet, reducing stress, um, supplementing well, those are all really important, and really for all of us
Yeah.
in general, so that
Oh,
we
yes.
don't end up getting sick. Hmm. So
Yeah.
I just,
And what it really boils down to is that inflammation, right? Inflammation is just the root of
yes,
so
right.
much. Yeah.
Yes. Right, exactly. And I think and cancer as well. So, and that's something that I
Yeah.
really researched for my book.
Yes.
So, reducing
Mm-hmm.
inflammation is beneficial for all of us, even if you're feeling great in your life. You just,
Absolutely.
looking at reducing inflammation can only be beneficial. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
you did touch on stress when you were talking, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, you know, kind of delve a little bit deeper into that because we just finished up a series on anxiety, and we often talk about how stress can factor into the development of dis-ease, meaning that just like our
Mm-hmm.
bodies are not at ease, and
Yes.
whether that's
Mm-hmm.
mental or physical. Um,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, so what are some ways that you did mention stress reduction? So what are some ways that you have actually helped to reduce your own stress?
Okay, so this, like I said, stress was the hardest piece of the puzzle for me. And I
Yeah,
am not going to lie and and say that I'm like a beacon of peace now, because
yeah, that's
that is
okay.
so
I'm not either.
far from the truth. Yeah. And anyone I know will attest to that. But yeah, like when I developed the disease, it was a very stressful time. And um, so a big change that I made though is being really choosy about the types of things I'm busy with. Like I will
Mm,
say Hashimoto's and my son being ill were two kind of crappy things that completely changed my life and the type of person that I thought I was destined to become. So what
mm,
I, as you know, I'm a woman of faith, and I never
mhm,
imagined I'd be in the place I am now, living on this farm and doing the things I'm doing and doing the sort of work that I've thrown myself into. Um, but God puts things in our path. He knew all along who I was going to become at this point in my life, and He knows who I'm going to be, when I'm 80 years old. And I just find that really fascinating and cool. So
mhm,
what I mean by this little story here is that I'm choosy now about the types of things I'm busy with, and it really comes down to identity, and that is what can give us a sense of peace. So I think to myself, like, who am I? Like, I'm a child of God. I'm a daughter of the King. He made me uniquely me. And He put like the desires that I have, the passions that I have, the interests that I have within me. And He gave me the gifts that He did for a reason. The same way He did that for you and for every single person listening. So when I shifted my focus from doing all the things that I thought I was expected to do, or working in a career that wasn't fulfilling just because it paid some bills, or, volunteering my time in a way that sucked the life out of me, when I shifted my focus from doing all those things to doing what God made me to do, it brought me life rather than stress and anxiety. So that's a big one. I mean, yeah, there's stressful days and the to-do lists are long, but I'm grounded now in purpose in a way that I wasn't before, and that's priceless. There's
mm,
actually a John Piper quote from his book, Don't Waste Your Life, that I absolutely love, and it's been very helpful for me. And the quote says that it was not always plain to me that pursuing God's glory would be virtually the same as pursuing my joy. And that was
mm,
like just a breath of freedom for me, to know that by being who I am and doing the things that bring me joy, I'm bringing God glory. Um,
mm,
so I would say by changing the things that I choose to do in my life, I've really reduced my stress and anxiety. So yeah, just doing things that bring me peace and joy. And homeschooling was a really big piece of that puzzle for us, because school was a little bit stressful for us, and
mhm,
having the kids home reduced the pressure of following someone else's schedule and expectations. It reduced paperwork. It reduced that morning stress, getting everyone out the door, yelling at them to get their shoes on.
mhm,
It reduced stress by not having to leave my son crying in his kindergarten classroom as I walked out of the school, feeling just like terrible. And
mhm,
also, I just worried less about quality time, because I'm going to be honest and upfront. And like, I am not the type of mom that's like, hey, let's sit down and read a book, or hey, let's
yeah.
sit down and do a craft. Like, for me, those are the things that nightmares are made of. and um,
I love it.
so, yeah. And now I just like, it's gone from like, spending, the kids are spending their best hours of their days at school to spending their best hours of the day at home with me. And it forced
Mm,
me into like slowing down and it's not so much hurry up and go. And now there's a lot more sit and listen. It's been good for the development of my character and theirs. Another thing I did
Mhm.
is I had mentioned how my career before wasn't very fulfilling for me as a nurse, for a variety of different reasons. So I took a huge step back from that, started my own business. Then God revealed how much I love to be an entrepreneur and to like kind of push the boundaries a little bit. Um, it's just funny because as I've taken on more of what I'm passionate about and my schedule's gotten fuller with that, I've actually never felt more fulfilled. So
Mhm.
the other thing I do that's super important is like how I start my day. So each morning I wake up early, when I'm on the ball, generally it's 5 o'clock, because I just need that time to like focus myself, read the Bible, pray, read a book, just start my day centered on my highest priority. And I just take that time and pray that God will give me the strength each day to serve him faithfully and make the right decisions with wisdom. And then also, how we start the day and how we end the day is so important. So I like to like read a book and just wind down like a fiction or something right before bed to just relax. And then just
Mhm.
filling my mind and my heart and my soul with things that are inspirational. So I love to listen to podcasts on faith and personal growth and mindset, and just fill myself up with that positivity and that growth mindset rather than letting myself be dragged down by the difficulties of the day. Those have been some
Mhm.
huge things for me.
Yeah. I like that a lot of what you're mentioning are it's a shift in perspective. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you did make some big life changes and that you decided to homeschool your children. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, I mean, gosh, what a great opportunity for your kids to be living
Mm-hmm.
where you are and all of the things that they're
Yeah.
learning. I'm so jealous of them. And just that they're not only, I mean, they're learning real life skills, they're learning about
Oh
nature and
yeah.
animals and gardening and just all of that. And plus, having you as their mom is just spectacular. Um,
Oh,
but
thank you.
really, the things that I'm hearing you say about just that you're taking time to really think about what brings you joy, what your purpose is, that
Mm-hmm.
you want to be pleasing in the Lord's eyes, and that you see that your life as a calling from
Mm-hmm.
God, and what a
Yeah.
blessing that is um, to others and to yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I really can appreciate that, and I think if we all just took time, like you said, you start and end the day doing things that are
Mm-hmm.
um, either spiritual, reading scripture, or just winding down and
Mm-hmm.
centering your mind. If we all just took time to do that, I think taking that frantic out of our life, that's when
Yeah.
we can really find our joy um, in the midst of the chaos.
And I just have to say, like, the title for my blog and my Instagram, like The Grace to Grow, it very much
Mhm.
came from that intentional perspective. Like my biggest frustration and sadness comes from watching people live lives where it's just like, you know, wake up in the morning, get my stuff done so I can go to bed, and wake up in the morning and get my stuff done and go to bed. And
Yeah.
I just feel like there's so much more to it than that. And we are in the place we are with the unique personalities that we have for a reason. And, I just want us all to give ourselves and each other that grace to grow and do the things that we're called to do.
Yeah, and I think that your ministry here is a very necessary thing, because what you just described, I think, is, I know it's the American way of life. It's probably the Canadian way of
Hmm.
life too,
Oh,
too, but
absolutely.
just
Yeah.
yeah, just the grind of like you said,
Hmm.
it's like a task. Check one
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
off your list, check the next thing off your list, check the next thing, go to
Hmm.
bed. It's just
Yeah.
it is it's we're really just allowing life to control us rather than being in control of our lives. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so another thing that I have really resonated with you, Cecily, is that, and I know
Hmm.
you have spoken about this before about,
Hmm.
we've looked at various enneagrams and things, but I know that you're a fellow
Hmm.
introvert, which I am,
Yes, ma'am.
and Yeah, me too. And although I did meet you on social media, I do think sometimes it's hard for us to devote time to there without getting overwhelmed. So what you were just
Yeah.
saying about, kind of centering yourself, sometimes I feel like I can't
Hmm.
center myself very well on social media.
Right.
Like I have to
Hmm.
think ahead of time about what I want to post because that's when I can get clear. But when I go in there and just start scrolling and looking at other
Oh
feeds or
yeah.
like, how am I not measuring up? How am I not good enough? um,
Hmm.
my mind doesn't go to a healthy place. When I was looking through on your website, I noticed that you had written a blog post just about not devoting as much time as to social media, to
Hmm.
kind of like letting that have like a back seat.
Yeah.
So can you tell us your thoughts on balancing our life and social media and how to balance that with work and play?
Oh, yes. Like this is just another passion of mine. I mean, health, faith, and time management are like my jam. So I would say my relationship with social media could be classified as complicated because I believe that when done right, social media is a huge blessing and a great way to
Mhm.
connect with friends and family who are far away. And it's led me to some of my best friendships, honestly. So for
Mhm.
me, clearly, as a blogger and whatever the heck I am, I do rely on it in a lot of ways to grow my business and to grow my relationships with people. But I believe it needs to start with honestly assessing our relationship with it. So social media, I'm quoting a lot actually from that blog post, but it's just how I
Mhm.
feel,
Mhm.
is that social media should not have the power to control how we spend our time. It should not influence how we feel about ourselves. It shouldn't control
Mhm.
how we feel about the job we're doing as a mother, a woman, or a human. It shouldn't affect our mood unless it's bringing us joy. It shouldn't be a source of temptation, which is a big one. And it shouldn't be where we look for validation. So I can say for
Mm.
myself that, I don't really struggle with the comparison game. That's not something that's a struggle for me, but I do struggle with the sense of urgency. So I'll feel like
Mm.
I'll put something up and someone will respond or ask me a question and I'll feel like I have to like immediately reply. Um, and that's
Yeah.
just not the truth, in my opinion. There's a lot
No.
of social media
No.
experts that beg to differ. But for
Mhm.
me, it's like it comes down again to priorities, and like what we say our
Mhm.
priorities are should be the things we're spending most of our time on. So actually a couple
Yeah.
social media experts that I follow talk beautifully about like planning wisely. So, 30 minutes a day if you're trying to like grow a business and connect on social media, to like, 10 minutes to engage with your followers, 10 minutes to engage with new people, 10 minutes engaging with stories. And then posting a few times a week to your feed and in your stories. But I just believe that it just shouldn't control our time, our self-worth, our mood, or anything like
Mhm.
that. So, when I'm struggling, like say I've got something big going on with my work or my blog or my business at the time, but I really need to focus on my family. I know this about myself, that I sometimes will feel that pull towards urgency. And if I do, I just shut my phone right off, or I put it up high,
Mhm.
and it has to be really high because I'm tall. And so, for other people, a tip that I have is like going into settings and checking out your screen time and just, getting real honest about how you spend your time, and
Mhm.
unfollowing accounts that make you feel unworthy or that are like bringing you down. Like it's something that's meant to add to our life. It shouldn't be taking
Yeah.
away from who we are. And there's different apps you can use also that can limit your time if you're really having time regulating yourself. So that's a good option for people as well. But the main message I have when it comes to social media is that your worth is not defined by what you see on social media. And then, most importantly, I always like to remind people that they are in charge of what they do in a day. Like, so
Mhm.
often, like you said, we just get carried away by what's happening. But just like with everything in life,
Yeah.
you are in charge of your relationship with social media. You get to make the rules for how you do that. And the same thing with health. Like you are in charge of what you put in your mouth. You are in charge of how you move your body. you are in charge of how you react in a certain situation. Like, I think people so often can fall victim and get stuck there. But I think we need to remind ourselves that God gave us our own mind so that we can make those important decisions. But yeah, as an introvert, I definitely, like, as an introvert trying to grow a business, I can often feel drained, or like, oh, I have to just do everything right and I have to follow a schedule. And then I slowly die. And I need a
Yeah.
break, you know? And so I think it's just important to put those boundaries in place, keep your priorities where they belong. And when your priorities are where they belong, it's you're doing well. It's when things get skewed. But I always say to people that I work with, like, if you have success in your business but you've had to compromise your morals, your values, your priorities, it's not success at all, and it's not God's
Mm.
plan.
Mm.
So that's what I have to constantly remind myself of as well, because there are days where I royally screw it all up and I throw all the things I know out the window and I do what my
Yeah.
instincts are, and my instincts aren't always right. So it's
Yeah.
something that I remind myself with every day. And that's why I start my day with that intentional time to, like, and I'm not kidding when I say, God, give me the strength to do what I'm supposed to do and to make wise decisions, because on my own power, I can't. So I
Yeah.
guess, does that answer that?
Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, yes. And I really love that so much. I mean, I was like almost in tears reading that blog post because
Aw.
it just resonated so strongly. And I think, not just with me, but with everybody, because I think when we live in this age of social media and everything, and even if someone isn't that big into social media or Instagram,
Mhm,
just like
mhm.
the news that we're bombarded with through the
Oh, yeah.
television, and it's just
Mhm,
all, rushing at us and negative, and everything is so fast paced. And
mhm.
um,
Yeah.
just trying to get control over ourselves and
Yes.
understand that our worth comes from just that we were born as a child of God, and that
Yes.
it has nothing to do with the way that other people look at us. It doesn't matter how many followers we have, how popular we are, how many
Yeah.
times you've posted on Instagram this week. It has nothing to do with that. And I think
Mhm.
you touched on this so nicely, is that the way to get to that is just getting
Yeah.
quiet, spending that time in the morning. I used to think, well, if I can wake up 5 minutes before my kids, if that's all I get,
Yes.
it's not
Yeah.
much. And maybe some people would think, "Well, what in the world? Like, just sleep in." But
Mhm.
if I can get 5 minutes to myself, I can center my mind, I can pray,
Oh,
even
yeah.
if I don't have time to read scripture. It really helps me, just get in touch with myself. And I think that's just really important for us, as
Mhm.
women in general today, as moms, that, we are important. We don't need to be validated by other people, that
Mhm.
we just need to show up in this life and serve as best as we can, knowing that
Mhm.
we are loved because we are here. So
Yes.
I really encourage people to take a look at your blog, because it is very heartfelt. Her posts are amazing, everybody. And just
True.
lastly, how can people find you, Cecily, if they want to connect with you, either on your website or through social media?
Yeah. So there's a few different ways. So first is my website. So that's just
Okay.
thegracetogrow.com. So that's pretty easy to find, thegracetogrow.com. And on there, actually, I would love to share with your listeners that actually you can find it at the bottom of the social media post, is I have made it possible for people to access this free multi-page printable that I created to help people get
Mm,
their priorities straight, like identify them, understand them, and make sure that they're organizing their life around those priorities. So based on our conversation
awesome.
today, I think people might enjoy that.
For
So yeah, the
sure.
website, and then my Instagram is instagram.com/thegrace.togrow. Um, and
Mhm.
that's where I'm at daily. Like you said, I love to do stories. And that's just kind of where people can see my real life and different things that I'm doing. It's where I post, a couple times a week, what's going on in my brain or what I'm working on in the health world. And then the Facebook group is like a different entity altogether. So the Facebook group is called Intentional Living with the Grace to Grow, and it's just a rapidly growing community. And what I do there is I host expert guests live every week. And then it's kind of like a topic of the week, and we just engage with each other based on that. And so I've been loving to do that. And yeah, the more people in that group, the better, because the more people you can talk with, the more you learn and the more you grow. So yeah.
Yeah, I can give a testament to that too, because you're it's almost like you have like a tiny podcast like every week coming out. Not a tiny, because they're longer interviews, but it's but you don't have to jump on live. You can go back and listen to it later on. So it's such a good resource to have for people, just talking about all things health and, like you said, intentional living, various topics.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
just love what you're doing, Cecily, and I'm really, really
Thank you.
thankful that we could share you today on our show.
I'm so glad to have been here. I'm so glad to have a relationship with you. And this has been so much fun.
Before we go, we just want to remind you of our show partner, Amazon. Amazon is the world's largest superstore and sells everything from clothes to lawn furniture to cleaning supplies. It also sells digital content like movies, music, and apps. If you shop on Amazon, which is likely, you can support our show at the same time. Simply click on the Amazon link in our show notes at the bottom of this episode, either in your podcast app or through our website. It's also available on the products page on our website. The link will take you directly to Amazon, where anything you purchase will help our show make a small affiliate commission. These proceeds help to benefit the production costs of our show, and best yet, it costs nothing extra for you. Just search for the links area in our show notes to find access to the Amazon link. That's it for today. For more from Kim, you can go to kimmaravich.com. For more from Lori, go to simplyempoweredllc.com. We're always open to listener questions or suggestions for the show. You can email those to contact@awholenewyoupodcast.com. We'd also love it if you joined our Facebook community and followed us on Instagram. Just search for A Whole New You Podcast. And lastly, if you'd be so kind as to leave us a rating and review in iTunes, we would really appreciate that, so more people can find our show and join our community. We'll see you next week.